In this changing world, you can rely on us to meet all the supply chain challenges. We provide solutions reducing your environmental impact. We are ready for tomorrow.
Opportunity is out there, everywhere. Opportunity for innovation, for discovery, for breakthroughs. The challenge in healthcare is navigating vast quantities of data and information, disparate stakeholders, and new technologies. It's a complex, disconnected environment. At IQVIA, we believe this requires a new approach. Because when we create intelligent connections, you can see paths you didn't know were there, accomplish things you didn't think were possible, and drive healthcare forward like never before. We call it IQVIA Connected Intelligence. Connected Intelligence brings together IQVIA's expansive portfolio of capabilities, including unparalleled data, advanced analytics, innovative technologies, and cutting-edge services. With our industry-leading healthcare expertise, intelligent connections enable you to modernize R&D, demonstrate value of treatments, enhance stakeholder engagement, elevate execution, and drive operational efficiency. Only IQVIA has the global scale and commitment to the healthcare ecosystem to deliver this next-level approach to moving healthcare forward. Discover deeper insights, drive smarter decisions, and unleash new opportunities. IQVIA Connected Intelligence.
In this changing world, you can rely on us to meet all the supply chain challenges. We provide solutions, reducing your environmental impact. We are ready for tomorrow.
Opportunity is out there, everywhere. Opportunity for innovation, for discovery, for breakthroughs. The challenge in healthcare is navigating vast quantities of data and information, disparate stakeholders, and new technologies. It's a complex, disconnected environment. At IQVIA, we believe this requires a new approach. Because when we create intelligent connections, you can see paths you didn't know were there, accomplish things you didn't think were possible, and drive healthcare forward like never before. We call it IQVIA Connected Intelligence. Connected Intelligence brings together IQVIA's expansive portfolio of capabilities, including unparalleled data, advanced analytics, innovative technologies, and cutting-edge services. With our industry-leading healthcare expertise, intelligent connections enable you to modernize R&D, demonstrate value of treatments, enhance stakeholder engagement, elevate execution, and drive operational efficiency. Only IQVIA has the global scale and commitment to the healthcare ecosystem to deliver this next-level approach to moving healthcare forward. Discover deeper insights, drive smarter decisions, and unleash new opportunities. IQVIA Connected Intelligence.
In this changing world, you can rely on us to meet all the supply chain challenges. We provide solutions, reducing your environmental impact. We are ready for tomorrow.
Opportunity is out there, everywhere. Opportunity for innovation, for discovery, for breakthroughs. The challenge in healthcare is navigating vast quantities of data and information, disparate stakeholders, and new technologies. It's a complex, disconnected environment. At IQVIA, we believe this requires a new approach. Because when we create intelligent connections, you can see paths you didn't know were there, accomplish things you didn't think were possible, and drive healthcare forward like never before. We call it IQVIA Connected Intelligence. Connected Intelligence brings together IQVIA's expansive portfolio of capabilities, including unparalleled data, advanced analytics, innovative technologies, and cutting-edge services. With our industry-leading healthcare expertise, intelligent connections enable you to modernize R&D, demonstrate value of treatments, enhance stakeholder engagement, elevate execution, and drive operational efficiency. Only IQVIA has the global scale and commitment to the healthcare ecosystem to deliver this next-level approach to moving healthcare forward. Discover deeper insights, drive smarter decisions, and unleash new opportunities. IQVIA Connected Intelligence.
In this changing world, you can rely on us to meet all the supply chain challenges. We provide solutions, reducing your environmental impact. We are ready for tomorrow.
Opportunity is out there, everywhere. Opportunity for innovation, for discovery, for breakthroughs. The challenge in healthcare is navigating vast quantities of data and information, disparate stakeholders, and new technologies. It's a complex, disconnected environment. At IQVIA, we believe this requires a new approach. Because when we create intelligent connections, you can see paths you didn't know were there, accomplish things you didn't think were possible, and drive healthcare forward like never before. We call it IQVIA Connected Intelligence. Connected Intelligence brings together IQVIA's expansive portfolio of capabilities, including unparalleled data, advanced analytics, innovative technologies, and cutting-edge services. With our industry-leading healthcare expertise, intelligent connections enable you to modernize R&D, demonstrate value of treatments, enhance stakeholder engagement, elevate execution, and drive operational efficiency. Only IQVIA has the global scale and commitment to the healthcare ecosystem to deliver this next-level approach to moving healthcare forward. Discover deeper insights, drive smarter decisions, and unleash new opportunities. IQVIA Connected Intelligence.
In this changing world, you can rely on us to meet all the supply chain challenges. We provide solutions, reducing your environmental impact. We are ready for tomorrow.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues. We hope you have spent a very nice evening and enjoyed the nice weather. We were really lucky yesterday, not so much today, but as we have to work here, it's perfectly fine. It's an enormous pleasure for all of us to welcome you on our second day of the conference. Today we want to take a closer look in the overarching trends and developments of our sector and to discuss how we can strengthen and align them along the European healthcare agenda. As you know, the spirit and the aim of this conference is to provide all of you a valuable platform for exchange and interaction. We want to bring together top leaders, decision makers from our sector, the pharmaceutical industry, and the supply chain at large, and to exchange best practices and to foster a true dialogue. In the first session of this morning, I have both the honor and pleasure to share the stage with two leading heads of medicines agencies. Professor Dr. Christa Wirtumer-Hoche, head of the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety, as well as Professor Dr. Karl Broich, President of the Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices here in Germany, who will join us virtually. And first and foremost, many thanks to both of you for joining us here today, in person as well as virtually. We believe this session could not be more timely, as we aim to look at medicines agencies, their heads and their responses to how we can better mitigate the impact of medicine shortages on patients. We would like to build on the lessons learned from the pandemic as well as the pre-existing understanding of the root causes of medicine shortages. As you know, full-service healthcare providers and distributors have a key position in the availability of medicines and medical devices to patients and to mitigate shortages to providing our expertise and infrastructure. I know everyone in this room has heard many times, countless times, but we believe we truly are the vital link in healthcare. So this morning we'll explore what is happening in the member states on national level and how we can best coordinate the approach on European level. And now without further ado, I would like to ask you Christa on stage. And Christa, in addition to being the head of the Austrian Agency for Health and Food Safety, Christa is also a member of many European working groups, committees, and was until March the chair of the EMA Managing Board. So it's really a pleasure, and thank you very much for having taken the effort to join us here in person. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Monica, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure for me to join you at this very interesting conference. And we have heard yesterday a lot of very interesting and inspiring presentations. And one of the words which was mentioned quite often was the word shortage. And it is now a very important task, I think, for all of us to avoid shortages in the interest of the patients. But what is interesting, we were talking since years about the word shortages, but there was no clear definition. And yesterday in one of the presentations, it also was mentioned, what is the problem? That we do not have a common definition. I would say we are now a step further, but we have not finally reached the goal to have it in all the member states in the same manner, the definition for the word shortage. What we identified, and I think this is clear, that the shortage is when we have a current or an anticipated disruption of supply. But what is supply? Supply is the total volume of the stock of an individual medicinal product placed on the market. And there is another very, very important word. This is the word, the demand. How is calculating the demand, and how will this be done in the future? So until now, I would say until the beginning of the pandemic situation, it was the duty of the marketing authorization holder to calculate the demand. It is written in the European legislation as well as in all the national legislations. But with the pandemic situation, the situation has changed. I remember that in March 2020, I was called from the ministry and they said, please give us the number. How many do we need from Propofol? How much do we need from Midazolam? How much do we need in kilogram of paracetamol and so on? And I said, this was not one of my business until now. And we built up networks with the pharmacists at the hospitals, with the physicians, but it was not easy to calculate. And this duty, it is now more and more with us, especially concerning specific substances. And in the future, and I also discussed this, we should use the available data. There are a lot of sales data available. And perhaps in the future, with an, artificial intelligence, we can get better demands, calculated demands, as we have at the moment. Of course, what is also very important, that there is an open communication between the manufacturer and US wholesalers, because US wholesalers have the big responsibility to distribute the product on the market. And therefore, it is also for US wholesaler of utmost importance to know in case there's a problem with the delivery of a medicinal product. And so therefore we have in the European legislation that all the marketing authorization holders should inform the authorities and you and all the hospitals at least 2 months in advance. So this is not really functioning, to be honest. And in addition, the member states have their own national additional provisions in order to avoid shortages, to guarantee that there is a delivery of the products needed. And so therefore, we have adapted our our Medicines Act to change from 2 months to 4 months in advance. And the reason was that at the hospitals, they informed us that they need more time if a product is not available to switch to an alternative product, and also to train the doctors how to apply the other product. So we switched to 4 months. But this, to be honest, is also not the solution of the problem. Because there are specific cases when a manufacturer can estimate that there will be a shortage because they are stopping the production at one side, or they are improving the production. So they have the duty to inform us. But what are the real problems? The shortages which are occurring more or less suddenly. And so therefore we said, okay, we need a mandatory information from the marketing authorization holder if the product is unavailable for more than 2 weeks. That he can estimate for more than 2 weeks we won't have the problem. Or it is a limited availability of the products for over 4 weeks. So again, perhaps you will question, why again are there 2 different timelines? And I have to say that we have to take into consideration other existing timelines, for example, from the social insurance. So not so easy, but nevertheless we managed to set up a legal act that it is mandatory for human medicinal products, prescription only, to inform us. And the date for coming into operation was the 1st of April 2020. So first of all, it was not an April joke. Secondly, it was more or less at the beginning of the pandemic situation. But we prepared, we discussed already, because we have a task force on shortages in Austria, where we have all the different stakeholders of the distribution chain sitting on the same table and discussing. trying to find the best solution in order to avoid shortages. And we set up a database which is public available on our website, and where you can find the information. Is it not available at all? Are only some pack size not available? And also the reason for non-availability. And I have to say that it functions quite well, and we are informed about shortages. And our next step is that we provide this information, the information of the database, via the doctor's software directly to the prescribing physician, so that they can check whether a product is available before prescribing, so that we avoid that the patient is going to the pharmacy and then he's informed, sorry, the product is not available at the moment. So, and this is a next step in the right direction. So, for this presentation, I tried to give an overview what are the root causes. Because also since years, in European groups, at national level, we try to find out the root causes. And I have to say that in our database, we have a much more detailed prescription on the root cases, but I grouped it now to the main reasons, and you can see that 66% of the shortages are due to manufacturing delays, manufacturing problems. This includes also unavailability of the active substance, unavailability of some of the excipients. Then about 20% is unexpected increase of demand. Again, we have this keyword demand. This is something where I said we should mention better in the future to calculate the demand better. And also that the manufacturers are able to increase their production on a short notice. The other I grouped together on shipping. Perhaps all you remember that there was the problem with the big ship in the Suez Canal, so this also caused problem. And I think if this ship would have stuck for a longer time, we all would have realized it more than a close down in China. And also some regulatory issues. And I think this is very important to analyze this in detail, because as it was mentioned already yesterday, we are currently updating the pharma legislation, and if there is the possibility to improve one or the other point, that should be done. What else is in this legal act? It is the possibility that we can have a ban on parallel export. But this ban only will happen if we really check the situation, and in the interest of our Austrian patient, we say that the demand, at least again the word demand, is delivered to the Austrian market, but it's disappearing. And we don't have enough product on the market, and then it is a problem for the patient. So the calculated patient need is not any longer available. In this, there would be a risk to the public health, and in this situation, we can be allowed to announce this ban of a parallel export. I think I do not want to discuss it in too much in detail, this ban on parallel export, but it helped in several situations. And again, it will only be said by the authority if there is really a reason that the amount of product necessary for a market is not available for the patients. And again, here I think when we are calculating the demand to a great extent, and this amount is put on the market, then it has to stay on the market. And we are not the only country, and we are discussing this also with the Commission, and the Commission agreed in the situation of that there is a risk to public health, we can do that. So what else are we doing at national level? At national level and further, I think we will discuss that later, also what will be done at European level. we are also setting up other risk mitigation strategies. And therefore, we, in addition to this register which I mentioned, we are also monitoring the products available on the market. So products which are currently not under shortage, but all the products, we started to classify them according to their risk level, high, middle, and low risk level, this is then based on 3 criteria. First of all, the therapeutic indication. Yeah? Then the availability of alternatives, and we also included market shares. Why? Because if you have a shortage of a company which holds about 80% market share, then it is not so easy that another company is stepping in order to avoid that we will run into a shortage. So that means we have this diagram of classifying the medicinal products. And again, we are not doing that per substance, we are doing this per product. And of course, this is an information which will be provided to the marketing authorization holder. And based on this classification, and again, we are starting doing that, yeah? Because it's a lot of work having a look at all the products, and we are grouping them according to the ATC code. And we start then now with the oncological products. And according now to this classification, whether they are at high risk, middle, or low risk, we are elaborating on mitigation measures. So one of the mitigation measures, which is discussed in detail, is stockpiling. But the question is stockpiling always solving the problem? And the answer is no, not for all the products, especially if this is a product for a rare disease. But nevertheless, we have to discuss stockpiling, and this is also done at European level, and it is questioned whether there should be some kind of provision in the legislation. I know that the wholesalers are also very, very active in finding solutions, how to set up a storage possibility in order to avoid shortages for certain products. And the question is, which products? But there is also the discussion for products which are at high risk. Is it really enough to have only one manufacturer? In case there is a problem, and please remember I said that the majority of reasons, of root causes are in the manufacturing chain. And so at least since years a recommendation that a manufactured marketing authorization holder has at least 2 production sites with also the possibility for an increased production. Or we are asking for a good supply management in order to be sure that there is no supply disruption. Of course, it would be not realistic to say that in the future we won't have products from India and China, so we also have to work on the security of this supply chain. And further activities and risk measures to mitigate, which are currently under discussion. Of course, if there is no risk, then we are not asking for any mitigation measures, so no actions are required. But especially for the high-risk products, we have to think about it. And again, here, this is a duty which is now on us at the national competent authority, which is on all the stakeholders to define a list where we really have to immediately do action according to the emergency situation. So thank you. With this aspect, I will close my presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christa. This risk mitigation and risk profiling of the medicinal products, that looks very interesting. Are there attempts to do that on European level as well?
Yes, the Commission has set up a working group also to discuss this criteria for classifying the medicinal products. And what we realized from Austria is that we are more to say, further advanced than other member states. But what was interesting, it was accepted to have as a criteria the therapeutic indication, and also the question, are there alternatives available? But Europe at the moment was not interested on market shares. So I think a lot has to be done that we really have a harmonized view in Europe about the criteria.
And then I have a similar quick second question. Then we discuss a lot about databases. You might have some reflection in Austria. How do you see that nationally and then Europe-wide to work together in the future?
A very good question, Monica. I would say, especially as I have emphasis so much on the word demand and calculation of the demand. There are several member states quite advanced. For example, Denmark, Finland, also Spain, and other countries who really have set up already a very, very good database where all the different stakeholders have to put in the information on available stocks about demand calculations and so on. Unfortunately, this we don't have at the moment in Austria. And yes, of course, answering your question, there is also under discussion to set up a European database. Especially now with the extended mandate of the European Medicines Agency, that for critical medicinal product, this information has also then go to this new database, which has to be set up until 2025.
And we might come back with a question and ask Professor Karl Broich about his view. So I think we are going to challenge our technical system, and I see it works very good. So now we would like to pass on the floor to Professor Dr. Karl Broich, who is since 2014 the president of the Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices in Bonn. He's a member of the European Medicines Agency's Management Board and chair of the EU Telematics Managing Board. In addition, he's he's member of the Heads of Medicines Agency's Management Group, and most recently he was appointed as co-chair of the Executive Steering Group on Shortages and Safety of Medicinal Products, alongside Ms. Ima Cook, the Executive Director of the European Medicines Agency. So thank you for joining us, Karl. We regret not to have you here in person, but yeah, fortunately, it seems to work very well with the techniques, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monica. I hope you can hear me well. I see a nodding head here. Well, thank you very much for the kind invitation. Unfortunately, I was not able to join you in person, but I hope we can manage here via this. I think we tested it in the pandemic crisis situation so many times, so hopefully it will work. Well, Krista has set the scene perfectly with the root causes and how it is done in Austria, and we have a very similar system here in Germany. So now, okay, now it works. So not every delivery shortage is a supply shortage, and we have here a risk management tool, and we defined risk factors for products based on the indication, then particularly on the supply chain, is there a monopolism or oligopolism at risk? And the definition has been mentioned by Krista. So here in Germany, we have a shortage if there's an interruption longer than 2 weeks, or a significant increase in demand, which can't be met adequately. And Krista mentioned the problem of demand. And we have seen that recently here in Germany with tamoxifen. So there was a shortage, and then there was a hoarding by patients, and then the situation became critical. We have other examples. In 2016, it has been piperacillin and tazobactam, 50% depending on the production on one manufacturer. It was similar with valsartan in 2018. Here, more than 50% have been dependent on one manufacturer. And I think this monopolism is one of the key root causes. During the pandemic situation, Krista mentioned that as well. So there was temporary export restrictions. We did have or have seen delays in the trade routes, and now the war in the Ukraine shows the vulnerability of trade relations again. So here in Germany, it was similar like in Austria. We are discussing shortages for many years, and we started to formalize it and to mitigate since 2016 with establishment of a dual fix for shortages under our direction here at the BfArM. And as Krista mentioned, all stakeholders attended this dual fix so that we have all information then available. And over the last years, this has been formalized more and more, and BfArM has been strengthened to coordinate shortages and to mitigate and to establish measures to mitigate then. And this has been followed now by a so-called advisory board. So here we have legal power to interact then with the stakeholders, and this has been very successful in the pandemic situation. What we are planning now is a new portal here in Germany, in addition to the European activities, and the extended mandate of the EMA has been mentioned. What is now the current role of this advisory board here in Germany? So it allows us a continuous monitoring and evaluation of the supply situation. So we can support the higher federal authorities in assessing the supply relevance of a supply shortage. And particularly, we can do recommendations for improving the supply situation. So we have now the legal power to react in the system, and we're taking measures to avert or mitigate an imminent or existing supply relevant shortage, so such as quota allocation or stockpiling, similar as Austria is doing. And we have a requirement now for marketing authorization holders and wholesalers to provide data on available stocks, production and sales volume, as well as information on impending supply bottlenecks. That has been new in Germany. So the specifications of the finished products is required for the assessment here, and this is legally bound now as well. And we have some examples of a good cooperation, particularly with Fagro during the pandemic situation here in Germany. In addition to access to the market data, Fagro provided us with information on the availability of ICU drugs in wholesale on a weekly basis. So that allowed us to identify important trends, and particularly here in Germany, ICU drugs are generally sold directly to the hospital. So this information was extremely helpful for us. And on our request, Fagro provided simply unbureaucratic and ad hoc support in the first wave to supply a hospital when a regular supply of drug was no longer available. So that was, for instance, for propofol, very helpful. In dual fix meetings during the first wave, Fagro was able to make such an important contribution to our assessment of the supply situation with its knowledge of cross-border supply chains as well. So this is extremely helpful to work here together. And this was helpful as well in the tamoxifen situation. So it was not a European issue, it was an issue here in Germany, but due to our legal situation, we have been able to define a situation that it could be important. There was a voluntary commitment to prescribe and dispense small pack sizes for some time, and pragmatic reimbursement. So this crisis and shortage is now solved. What is done in the European Union? So we see this increase in concentration in the generic drug market, and these are the drugs most often involved in shortages. So we have a resulting vulnerability from manufacturers and regions. So these monopolism, oligopolism is a problem. So we need a diversification in terms of manufacturers diversity. We need maintenance of a broad therapeutic spectrum. And we need then EU strategy for our solutions. This is done on several levels. So we have a strategy for Europe and strengthening the resilience of our system. So Krista mentioned the task force, and particularly now with the new mandate of the EMA, the so-called medicines shortage steering group has been established. So based on the experience from the pandemic situation, the Commission is fostering with the EU for Health program improvements in supply and shortages situation. BfArM is one of the leads in the working parties of the Joint Action 6, monitoring and reporting medicine shortages. And on our national level, we got now then resources to build up using artificial intelligence, a database to check for the vulnerability in the future for key active ingredients. And we establish an office with an advisory and coordinating function here in Germany. So in conclusion, we have been pushed by the pandemic situation to do more than in earlier years. I think the industry concentration and the monopolism is now in every head, and we see what must be done for the diversification. We know that supply shortages can be avoided, but major steps are still necessary, and BfArM is similar like the Argus committed to do here our best to work that out on the national and as well on the European level. And with that, I close and open for questions and looking forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karl. If I may, a quick follow-up question. Now, do you think that the pandemic has left us better prepared for a future crisis? And how do you think that the extended mandate of the European Medicines Agency can support us in the future?
Yeah. I think a European solution is necessary. That is one of the lessons learned from the pandemic situation. And here, wholesalers are a big help to address these issues. And with the medicine shortage steering group in the future, using the earlier SPOC system, which are doing a lot of the work, and in the steering group we can mitigate and make the management decisions in this group. And as many heads of the national agencies are members of this steering group, so I think this is the right place to do it for a European level. And as Krista mentioned, we can learn from our Scandinavian colleagues how they are managing. But we are on that way, and of course, all these new techniques, even using artificial intelligence as a risk tool or risk management tool might be helpful in the future. And of course, this has been pushed by the COVID crisis.
Thank you very much, Karl. Before we continue our discussion, I would like to look in the audience whether we have any questions. Yes, in the middle.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Mundir from Novartis, and I have a question because you were mentioning that this monopoly of manufacturers is one of the main problems, but the industry has been advocating for multi-winner tendering, and oftentimes these tenderings at national level have been only based on the price and not on security of supply or environmental sustainability, and here the Nordics are also a model, right? But so will you and other countries in Europe also include this smart tendering, so not only price but other dimensions plus multi-winners?
Should I answer first, or Karl? Perhaps to give a short answer, yes, you are completely right. This tendering procedures, which is running in most of the member states, is not ideal in order to encourage companies to set more than one production line, and that in case of a shortage, if there is only one product winning the tender, yeah, we are totally relying on this product. And in case there is a manufacturing problem, yeah, what else? I think it is not our business, but I think, yes, there has to be done something to change this kind of tendering systems.
Yeah, and in addition to that, so I can tell you that our government and the ministry is already discussing these topics and rethinking some of these issues. So I think the government is well aware on this situation.
And if we stay for a moment with procurement, the creation of HERA has now given a momentum for, I think, more and more joint procurement. How do you see that developing, evolving, and where do you think are maybe stumbling blocks?
Yeah, I think it was a good system which was set up when there was a negotiation about the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. Because this was a possibility that we really have a fair distribution of vaccines at a time point where the vaccines not even have been authorized, and nobody was aware who will be the first one authorized, but that there was already a system set up that there will be a fair distribution all over Europe. But I think this is now prolonged with the therapeutics. And I think my personal view on that is that this is not an optimal system, because it is that the government has to buy it, a certain demand at a time point where the product is also not authorized yet. And I think, where is the private market? And I think US wholesalers should also be interested that we are then perhaps moving also with the vaccines back to a situation where we have a private market. We will always have some promotions for vaccinations, but I think that the government is buying the medicinal product is not the best way forward, and we have realized that they also don't have the logistic, yeah, for distributing the product in their country. And I will stop here, but there are many other points I can manage. Karl, please.
Yeah, so I fully agree here with Krista. I think in the crisis situation, it was perfectly fine to make this exactly in that way. There was a lot of criticism here in Germany on that procedures too slow, and you all know about that. But to have a fair distribution in the European Union, I think that was the only way, and was the direct way. But one of the lessons learned, it's not the perfect way. Yes. I share this view by Krista completely.
And maybe the next question to you, Karl. We have understood that it was foreseen in the coalition agreement of the government that there should be an early warning system created. Can you share with us what are the plans in this respect?
Yeah, so we will use then information from the available providers, and we will build up an additional database here in Germany, particularly on the risk factors, and to using here artificial intelligence techniques to manage here the risk factors and to have early signal detection system available so that we have more time to react. And all the coordination will be done by a separate bureau here at the bee farm. We are now building up. We got now the resources, or they will come very soon now from our government. And so we are ready to start with this activity.
Thank you. And Christa, do you think you will monitor then critical medicines the same way as now it should be put in place for the extended mandate of the European Medicines Agency for the crisis-relevant products?
Yeah, this is also a very good question, because for the moment we are working in this new executive steering group on shortages on this list. Yeah, where at the first stage we will have a list of therapeutic indications. So the first list, which has to be ready in August, won't include concrete active substances. This is a list of therapeutic indications. And then, depending on the emergency situation, on the crisis, we will adapt this list with concrete substances. Yeah? And we, at the moment, at national level, we are monitoring the products in order to be very transparent and also to give the hospitals, especially the hospitals, the chance to adapt to a situation where one or the other product won't be available.
Okay.
But something is really true. In the EU, we are having several systems, and we really have to move together to monitor the market better and to help each other in situations where one of the country has a shortage and the other one not. So we have to be much more transparent, and we have to use of available data and with the use of tools of artificial intelligence.
Karl, you would like to add anything there?
No, I think it's important that we start now with the two lists. The one on the indications, and then we are managing now the pandemic crisis. So it's the vaccines, and we are addressing now on this list. And we are starting now with the platform and this database, and we will inform tomorrow the steering group on the status of this and the next steps planned. So I think that this will be, and we will inform all stakeholders, of course, very soon as well.
Can I add something? This platform which Karl just mentioned, yes, it will be set up, and I also said this is the system which has to be ready in 2025, but I hope that we are using available information already in the system, because we are since years now working on several systems. We are starting to set up the SPORE system, so substance, product, organization and referentials. So there is information about the products available on the European market already somewhere in the system. Yeah? So we can build up on this information and have on the add-on, yeah, but not duplicate all the information which is already available. And my other favorite system is the system for the safety signals, because I always say each pack is in this system. And we should, and my hope was that I will know where the packs are. Yeah? This is not the situation at the moment, but I think we have several systems, we have information, and we should use it and bring it together, yes.
Thank you very much. I think that is a good conclusion of our session. We'll bring together what we have, put artificial intelligence on it, and the situation should be improved. Thank you, Karl, and many thanks to you, Christa, for joining us for the first session of the morning, which is always hard. But a big applause to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, I would like to hand over the moderation to our friend Bear. He has been already very active yesterday, so I don't need to introduce you anymore. And in this forum, you don't need any introduction in any case. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we're going to have one of, I think, the interesting discussions. We have 4 senior executives from 4 different organizations here. And may I ask in my panel here, Pierluigi Antonelli from Angelini Pharma to come up. There he is, yes. Juan Guerra, an old friend of mine from Allianz Healthcare. Tony, who is naturally the big guy in the room here, leading Viatris activity in developed markets, which is about 35, I think, or something like that. It's a big crowd. And then Mark, who comes with some very interesting perspective, leading Galenica in Switzerland. The way we will do this is that each of you will get to present a few slides on your business and what your activities and perspective is on this. I will ask a short question. And then once we have done that, we will go over to a discussion and discuss some of the topics that has been discussed during this meeting and we feel is the real big ones here. So I'm sure that we will come back to your shortage introduction that was done here and the comments about this. I will, for example, have a question. Krista, you had a list of additional requirements. So do you pay for those additional requirements? Or should I only deal with green products on the bottom of your list? Because everything else on a regulated price will be very expensive for me to deal with because you have a long list of additional requirements. Well, let's have those type of discussions when we go further. So Pierluigi, I want to introduce you, and I'll try to do it from memory. So you have started out in the consulting world, McKinsey, if I remember right, and then you have done several of the true blue chip pharmaceutical companies. You have done it, covered a lot of the different geographies, both on the US or the American side and many of the European countries. And you've been in almost every role we can be in. I think you have had 7 major launches here. So that was naturally to build up to get your present position. So can you please tell us a little about your present company?
Oh yes, I mean, I think not everybody knows. I'm working in a big multinational. Our company is Angelini Pharma. It's an integrated company, so we do have R&D, production and commercialization. Out of Italy, existing for 100 years, more than 100 years, and present in 25 countries. I joined early 2019 out of Novartis, which was my last employer, and we've been embarking in a pretty aggressive expansion, both geographically, where we covered countries where we were not present before, like France, UK, Nordics, Switzerland, but also with significant investments in M&A, where we invested about 1.2 billion euros over the last 3 years, acquiring a Swiss biotech called Arvel Therapeutics, which gave us a molecule called cenobamate for refractory epilepsy, and also a consumer healthcare brand called Thermacare from GSK Pfizer, which helped us also to strengthen our consumer healthcare business. I mean, our goal is to expand in prescription medicine and innovation. And I think, I mean, the future investments and also the build-up of pipeline will be concentrated in Rx. 3,000 people, 25 countries directly present, and through distributors, we are present in 70 countries worldwide.
When we talked yesterday, we talked about an environment that looks like it's going to grow with a lot of innovation, but we also talked about a lot of, let's call it, risk going forward here. The squeeze on the economy, the political unrest, and COVID may be coming back. How do you see the ability to get paid for those innovations that you are doing? Because that must be the challenge ultimately.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I think it's a bigger challenge also for mid-sized companies like ourselves, because I think, as you can imagine, we don't have a massive R&D engine like true multinationals, big ones. Although, I mean, for companies of our size, what's important is to be very, very diligent in finding assets which are really adding a benefit. I don't think there is any longer the possibility of, developing a Me-Too drug for a good reason. But the reality is that also, if I take the example of cenobamate, so we got an incredible assessment from NICE, with the first third agent epilepsy drug being assessed ever with a very positive outcome, and also very good pricing conditions, and yet we are discussing with another agency where in reality the benefits are not taken into account. So I think, what's important, once again, going back to the approach that is very dissimilar country by country in Europe, it would be making a lot of sense to kind of define better what's the framework which is applied to really understand how much of the benefits are those differentiated and what kind of value we should be providing to companies, because otherwise what we'll see is continuously, as soon as a company can, we'll see a diversion of investments from our continent to the classic US market, where apparently for decades, there has been a concentration of investments in R&D, but also a market which allows for decent return on investments.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue the little starting round here. Joanne, so first of all, I know you are Italian, Argentinian here. You have a finance background from the beginning. You worked in different type of companies. I know that you started at Anderson, I think, and then you have worked with different companies. And when I first met you, which must be a little more than 10 years ago, when you joined Allianz Healthcare, you were indeed in a finance role, and then you have been in every other role I've seen, and you're today the managing director for the Allianz Healthcare part, now a part of AMC Berlin here. Can you tell a little about Allianz Healthcare today and where you are and what's your big focus?
Yeah, thank you, Per. Well, our focus continues to be the market, our partners, our customers. We are also heavily involved on the post-transaction, post-acquisition activities. In 2 weeks it will be the first anniversary of the acquisition from AmerisourceBergen. We were previously with Walgreens Boots Alliance. I would say the focus is mainly our main focus is on innovation. We heard a lot about it yesterday. And the reason why is on innovation is because distributions continue to be, and it will continue to be challenging, because of the remuneration scheme, because it's perceived in many ways a commodity. So innovation for us is in 2 areas. One is customizing and trying to bring ad hoc solutions on our distribution. Specialties is becoming is the most important growing engine in Europe, but at the same time it's a problem because the way you have to handle those specialty products are more costly. You got to be more careful. Handling, storing, transporting those products is a challenge. And I think that the acquisition of AmerisourceBergen is a great opportunity in that area because they are expert on managing specialties in US. and they develop a lot of ad hoc services on top of the simple commodity service you can provide for specialties. That is basically adding value to the manufacturers, and is also helping the hospitals or the pharmacies that are the end customers for that. So we are really spending a lot of time trying to understand how they do that, because we believe that in our partnership approach that we always have with manufacturers, hospitals, pharmacies, we think that that could be a great added value that I think that we are way behind in Europe when you look at US. And they will continue to develop other services in our network for independent pharmacies. 3PL, pre-wholesale, is becoming more and more a request from manufacturers, so they can focus on the key core capabilities. And also developing direct-to-patient support, which is also linked to specialties, because it's one of the added value services that we can provide, and we are continuing to learn from AmerisourceBergen on that field.
I think the challenge you have is that you're operating in about 10 markets here, and each of those markets are slightly different. How is that type of message possible to communicate to the Americans that say, well, we are operating in 52 states?
Well, sometimes it's difficult for us to understand the differences on those 10 markets still. Because from outside it's perceived like, well, you get medicines, you put it in your warehouse, and then when you get the order, you distribute, that's it. But payers are different, models are different, competition is different, demands are different. And sometimes manufacturers are also asking different type of supports depending how the market is. I may say, and I will be very honest, one of our main concerns on the transaction was, this European-American equation that is always a bit challenging in every sector. But I may say that, first of all, they're very, and there's nobody from AB here, so I'm not trying to be nice or polite, they're very easy people to work with. Great culture. They understand wholesale, which is, of course, a big help. And I think that they're smart enough to already understand that the markets are different. Every time they're coming here, they're saying, well, hang on a second, this is the same problem that you face in these other markets, and the approach is different. So they're very keen to learn, they listen a lot. And I think that the most important thing is they're capitalizing from the best practice and mistakes done in the past by similar transactions. So from that standpoint of view, we found that the interaction with them in the understanding of the different market is much easier and much simpler than what we thought.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really good. It sounds promising. Tony, I take all bios from memory. You have 25 years with Mylan. That's a long time, and that is from when Mylan was a quite small company. You have been in most different roles in the company, and now, after the latest, not the last, the latest merger, you are really a big operation. You're responsible, as we said, for 35 countries, the developed markets here. Can you give us a little more, so to say, insight on the new company and what the new company is really trying to do here?
Certainly, Per, and good morning.
You have slides if you want them, or you just speak.
I wasn't sure if we were doing the slides or not doing the slides. I was a little perplexed with that, but certainly I would be more than happy to walk through it. You made me feel a little bit like a dinosaur being here 25 years at Mylan. I'm not sure how I transitioned into this new role, but Viatris has been a great experience for me. Certainly, getting a chance to run developed markets, bringing the legacy Mylan business and the legacy Upjohn business, very generically focused business with some legacy brands as well from Meta and Abbott over the years, with a legacy branded business with Upjohn, and bringing them together has been an amazing 18 months. And developed markets is an important business for Viatris. I would have said this in my slide if we get to them, that is Europe an important business for us? And it certainly is. Monica, I can't thank you and the Europe team enough. I saw this invite to Berlin and was just absolutely amazed by the city, not sure what to expect. And I got a chance to listen to the presenters. And I thought about our own business, and I think about, the city and what a transformation the city has gone through. And I think, I hear this, through, the presenters yesterday and this morning, and certainly from my colleagues, this industry is going through a very similar transition, and one that will require leadership. And I think Europe is well positioned. I heard the gentleman from IQVIA yesterday, your colleague Per, talk about the US and these rascal rebates and how, they used to subsidize the world. I still think the US is a great market to be in, by the way. I think Europe's a fantastic market to be in. And I think Viatris plays a big role with our customers and partners. Most importantly, we couldn't do it without our wholesale partners and our pharmacy partners in Europe. And we've got 1,400 products here. We're about a 60% branded business in Europe. We still have 40% generics, and we continue to grow that generic business every year, launching about 100 new products every year. So tremendous opportunities ahead, but it'll be a challenge. I don't have to go through the list of risks that each of us see in our business because I would be very redundant. I had a risk kind of market trend slide, but I could say I'll have the shortest presentation of the whole meeting because I'll just say ditto everything else everyone else has said so far. Yes, inflation's tough. Yes, cost of goods pressure is enormous. Yes, transportation costs have doubled. They're all, I can sing to the choir here, and we're dealing with the same issues. It's about providing and looking for collaborative solutions together with our partners in this marketplace. So look forward to it, Per, and look forward to the discussion.
Yeah. Our last CEO here is Mark from Galenica. You come from a very different background. You are a true marketing person in the base. You spent a long period with Swiss Telecom in different roles, but the thing is probably fairly have a common denominator with what you're doing now because it was related to services to your customers here, as far as I can understand. And you joined Galenica a year and a half ago or something like that, so a fairly short time period. You must have a lot of, so to say, new insights of having joined a company that actually had a very, very strong position in its local market.
Yeah, I've worked for more than 20 years in internet startups or telco industry, and then the last 10 years I was in the Swisscom executive board. Of course, that's true what you mentioned. I was quite surprised when I was first contacted by a company if I want to join Galenica, because then I thought, okay, what can I bring to the company? And as you mentioned, I guess at the end it's about customer, patient, it's about customer centricity, it's about customer experience, it's about retail. Galenica is also a retail company because we manage the largest pharmacy network in Switzerland. It's about transformation. When I come from another industry, I guess there are a couple of stuff that maybe healthcare, pharma industry could be a little bit more developed compared with other industries, and it's about the digitalization. And especially, I guess, in Switzerland, I don't know so much about other countries. In Switzerland, digitalization is quite lagging behind in the healthcare sector, and I guess there is some work to do in the next couple of years. And as you mentioned, we are really a pure Swiss company. We do 99% of our business in Switzerland. We have a couple of small businesses here in Germany, but just with products, not with assets.
Yeah.
And what I mentioned, what I thought when I joined the company, of course, it's sort of compared with my experience I've had the last decades was, of course, a little bit that I was surprised. I don't know if it's the same stuff in other countries, but I never saw an industry which is not willing, maybe, or not able, or has not the culture to sell their products. Pharmacy, in our pharmacies, we have about 24 million Swiss people. They work in our pharmacies every year. And I guess we could do much more, I would say, if the customer is in front of you, to do more with the customer.
So, I, as an outsider, have had many opportunities to see parts of Galenica, and some of the things that you do in Galenica, I think, is other wholesalers would be very impressed of. You have a specialty business since a long time. I've visited it when it turned 25 years old. That was probably 5 years ago. So you've had a home care-oriented specialty business for a long time, which I think it has quite good standing. A lot of companies would say really aspire to build something similar. And we have probably René Jenny here somewhere in the room, and he used to tell us about when Switzerland switched to largely once-a-day delivery to the pharmacy, largely. Much less than we have in most other countries, which is haunting us today when suddenly the environmental factor and the cost of so on. So I think you actually have come to a company that on many other aspects than what you describe as the commercial orientation actually has been really in the forefront.
Yeah, I guess we are compared with other company or with other wholesalers. I guess what we did, and that was not my job, that my predecessors did this. They started in 1995, I guess. Before we were for decades just a logistic company. Galenica was founded in 1927, and it was for many decades a logistic company. And then in 1995, they started to, I would say, a vertical and horizontal integration. First with their own products. That's our Verfura company. We are a little bit also a pharma company. We don't do research and everything, but we have our own products. And then secondly, also to build their own pharmacy network. That was in 2000 when they started to create their own pharmacy network. And today, as I mentioned, we have the biggest pharmacy network in Switzerland. And we are developing also the network every year, online and offline, of course, today. And now we are transforming the company in a really, I would say, integrated healthcare provider. That means, as you mentioned, we have different pillars. One pillar, as you mentioned, Per, it's care. For us, that's a huge potential in the care business in the future, also because of the aging society, of course, because of the cost pressure. People have to stay, or they want to stay as long at home as it's possible, or after a hospital, after they were in a hospital, they have to go at as fast as possible at home, also to save costs. And with our care organization, we treat the customer at home. It could be for chronic illnesses, as you mentioned, with Medi-services. It could also be with our company called Pixel, with artificial nutrition. That's all the stuff we do direct to the patient at home, really at your apartment, at your home. And on the other business, in the care business, it's really the home care. That means we have a whole service portfolio today from companies like Galexis, like Lifestage Solutions. That was our last company we acquired last year. It's a small company, it's kind of a startup, and they're building a platform to digitalization, to help the customer, the digitalization, really their processes internally. And I guess that's one of the business, or one of the solutions we can bring to our business customer, that's really to help them to do their business more cost efficient. And then, of course, behind, we always want to sell our products, but the business starts not with the product, the business starts with a service to help them to be more efficient in the whole processes, including our pharmacies, including Medi-services, including Medifilm, that's the blister company, and of course, including Galexis, the wholesaler.
I mean, we all work in different markets, and the ability to get paid for those type of things is probably what Joan says is the challenge in many other markets. But so you might be very wise to operate in the Swiss market and be able to move forward on this part. We've done the introduction of the four companies, and would like to get into the little more discussion part. Yesterday we spoke a lot about what I would in then say is the margin squeeze that is starting to hit this industry. It has been ongoing gradually for a very long time. Prices has been adjusted down, requirements has been added, but it has certainly accelerated just now, and maybe accelerated the last months with things like fuel going up, labor cost is starting to rise, and so on. And I will start with Tony to say, Tony, what is a company like yours doing to this? And it's a little, maybe a message to also what is happening with product portfolios and so on in a situation. What's the options? What can you do to deal with this margin squeeze?
No, I think it's a fair question, and it's a relevant question, not just for manufacturers, but for every sector, because usually in an inflationary world, you have the ability to raise prices in terms of what the consumer sees. That's why there's inflation. And in our marketplace, you just can't do that so easily. And I had created a slide that really looked at market trends, and if you would look at those trends, no different than anything we've talked about, inflation, cost increases, transportation changes, labor tightening, unemployment's at record lows, at the same time cost containment from government, you'd look at those risks and say, holy mackerel, we should go start making wine and cheese in Italy somewhere and forget about this business. But we do something very valuable and tremendous for society, and we deliver medicine, and it's an aging demographic, and one that is so important to Europe and to the world, quite frankly. So you have to continually look at your business and your portfolio. We have 1,400 products, many of them generic products. We launch 100 new products every year, bringing new innovation into the market, new affordability. But we do have to continue to look at where we have to trim and where we have to prune our portfolio. We've probably pruned 10% of our active SKUs within our European business, some markets greater than others, some markets we haven't launched generics in as much as I would prefer. So you have to continue to work with the payers, work with government, look for solutions together with wholesalers, pharmacies, and government. It's about having aligned priorities, quite frankly. How do we get the best alternative in front of the patient? How do we look at it from the patient's perspective? At the same time, know that we have to manage costs. It's not a simple solution, not for the faint of heart, certainly. It requires tremendous leadership, because sometimes to be a leader, you sacrifice the short term for the long-term benefit. And I think that's something as an industry we have to really think through, and how we develop some of those scoring mechanisms or tendering mechanisms, whatever it might be. I think it's going to be essential for the success of the industry and for really better care long-term for all the countries that we operate in.
But this is a little about Krista's problem, because trim means that you discontinue products. And I recently worked on a project on antibiotics in Europe, and I could see that a country like Sweden now have about a third of the molecules available that is available in Europe in general. And then you say, well, that's very narrow, old parts. But people say, well, that's the one we need many times for the antimicrobial resistance and so on. So the consequences are actually quite big for the overall system when those type of decisions are taken.
No, for sure. I mean, we have 16 plants and R&D facilities within Europe. We have 11,000 employees. About 3,500 of them are in the manufacturing R&D sector. And having products close to market are very important. But at the same time, when you have a tender that comes out every 2 weeks and you can't build a demand plan because it's going to change every 2 weeks because someone's trying to save a few euro cents, you know, it doesn't allow for long-term strategic thinking in terms of how you operate. We have to be nimble. We love competition. It's a great thing. I love innovation at the same time. You know, you need that complement to triangulate real healthcare change and real, you know, change in the way people, you know, live. But at the same time, we have to do it in a balanced way. We have to be able to come back and say, looking at the long term, how do we balance out this market so we don't have injectables that were out of stock on that hospitals can't get vancomycin or Piptaz, because we don't want to see that. We want to see an ability to have full supply in the market at a fair and balanced price.
So when you go back to Krista's slide, she had three different color codes. The bottom one was green, fine, no problem. But then when you get up to the top level here, do we need a slightly different system for securing the availability of many of those products that's maybe quite small? Under existing circumstances, they are not profitable many times, or they're, at least if you want to have the risk protection that she's talking about, then they're not profitable. Do we need a new remuneration system for those type of drugs?
Well, look, I think it's an industry discussion. I think the first thing you do is you get at a table and you talk about it, what makes sense for every one of us and how we can make it work. Because at the end of the day, my goal, and I'm believing industry's goal from a pharma perspective, at least a generic pharma perspective, is getting product in the patient and caregiver's hands, whether it's a physician, whether it's a hospital or a pharmacy, getting it to the patient. So I do think we need to explore different models. I think that's very wise, especially if there's that small subsegment of products that you just can't get, and you want to find a new mechanism to kind of secure it and identify lists that are critical to a country or market. You know, I think that's very valuable. Identifying these must-have lists with a group of products that you've been facing challenges on. But usually there's a reason why there's a challenge. There's a challenge because, you know, of inflation on one end, but quite frankly, it could be, you know, supply chain challenges we've had around, you know, shortages in labor in some markets. We've had, you know, even through COVID, you know, 95+% service levels, customer service levels into our markets. It's been quite unique. But regulators are putting up pressure when it comes to inspections on plants. At the same time, you know, the costs are getting squeezed, and these are all pressures that, you know, we take as an opportunity. You know, there's challenges every day in every one of our businesses, but, you know, there's got to be, the equilibrium has to be found, and I think that only comes through great dialogue and hearing each other out and then making the right decisions for the long term.
Joan, we used to talk about the sandwich syndrome, because so you hear the manufacturers is squeezed, and I'm sure that that means that they are probably not offering as much rebates to the wholesalers and so on. And then you were squeezed also from the other end here. What's your feeling about this new situation with the increasing thing, and where do you see that something have to give or be adjusted for?
Well, first of all, that's a question that I don't think that has only one answer. And are different dimensions where you need to work to be successful on that equation. First of all, I think that I've been in this industry for 10 years. The only event where I recall remuneration having been adjusted upwards was in France, based on what happened the last 2 years. In the other 10 years, it was basically either ignored or adjusted downwards. And over those 10 years, it's not just about inflation and the pressure in the market, but the profile of the portfolio changed. And that was not reflected there. The requirements changed. FMD was introduced. That was just an uplift of cost and with questionable benefits in the sector. Temperature control is moving more and more from just being a GDP to into more requirement that you must complete, and that is just increasing the cost. And clearly with the existing remuneration, that is not properly covered. So that is basically eroding your gross margin. So we live in a sector which is regulated, so you have limited capacity or no capacity to maneuver your top line or your margins. And then as a consequence, in the DNA of a good distributor, you have to have annual permanent productivity and efficiency programs in your service centers. But then the other piece, which I think that is quite important, not just to manage your margins, but also to be a good partner, because we truly believe in collaboration being the key in this sector, is developing services. And that's what manufacturers will not give you money for distribution. Manufacturers will be keen to recognize how you can help them to gain share, how you can help them to combine and complement with specific services their product portfolio. So here is really important to understand where manufacturers are going, which is their strategy to market, what patients really needs, and how we can also help pharmacies and hospitals. And that's why in our particular case, we have different brands where we can help pharmacies, we can help manufacturers, we can tailor-made solutions on direct to patients. So I think that it's not just one single angle of the equation, but it's a combination of many of them. And to be honest, that's a challenge, but I think that that's the beauty of our sector. That is keeping you intense in your day by day.
So you were saying the margin squeeze is not one thing, it's the 10,000 cuts that's pushing it down. But the solution is not one thing either. It's not just a increase of the margin. That would be a happy solution, but it's probably a combination of many small things too.
Well, let's say that the margin squeeze is one period.
Okay.
Is margin squeeze. I think that the way you tackle that is in different ways. And I think that what is absolutely key is if you will be expecting that you pass the hat to manufacturers in a different dimension and feeling the same pain. They have different margins, but they have their own problems. And many of the macroeconomic effects which are negatively impacting distributors are also impacting manufacturers. And they have also their own problems. Governments are always short of money. So if you truly think that somebody else will solve this problem, you will die. So you really need to take this under your control. And I think that the solution is coming from different angles.
Mm-hmm. So when we look on other industries, many times technology have had a significant impact on reducing the cost. So if you look on banking, for example, we have almost totally left going to the normal bank office, and we have digitalized many of the services and done it. I know that, Joan, we have discussed before a simple thing like an e-leaflet in each pack, which would mean that packs were country-wise much more flexible to be used. Your outsider view here, Mark, coming from different industries, is it something that strikes you on how we use human resources versus technology solutions, where you see that it looks like a no-brainer to you?
First of all, I guess if we talk about margin squeeze, I guess, okay, we are still we are in a regulated market. I can talk for Switzerland, I don't know in other countries, but in Switzerland, from our business, it's about 50% from turnover, it's in a regulated business. And it's still, regulation of course is always the bad and the good. And that comes from telco. There's a small part of the business is regulated, most of the business it's in the market. And I guess that margin squeeze, it's just normal, or if it's regulated or not. If you're not in a regulated market, then the market will squeezing your margin. I was in the business the last 10 years. We had 10 billion turnover in Switzerland in the company, and we lost every year about $500 million turnover. And that means margin, because telco is a fixed cost business. You don't have any, you just have fixed cost. That means you're losing every year 500 million Swiss francs just because of the competition, because of margin squeeze, but from the competition. It's just normal. And you have to compensate with digitalization, with processes. There are more intelligent than they were before, with focus on really what gives value to the customer. And for me, it's just normal kind to steer, to manage the business, that the margin will always go down in products that are on the market, and you have to develop new products, new services, new customer experience to overcompensate your margin squeeze. That's, for me, it's just a little bit normal.
I have integrate what you were saying, because I think digitalization certainly helps in recovering some of the margin squeeze in certain functions of a company like technical operations. But I see that, frankly speaking, on the commercial side, I see it more as a way to augment and differentiate the way we go to market rather than becoming more efficient. Because in reality, in many of our commercial structures, there is a fear that digitalization, multi-channel might lead to a reduction in the headcount. Therefore, there is also a cultural aspect that we've been working on, at least in my company, to let people understand that on the commercial side, by adding services, multi-channel activities, wrapping new features around the product is not a way to reduce costs, but is a way to look different in the eyes of our customers, in this case physicians or pharmacists, because otherwise we might have, a strong pushback, and you might have parts of the company going at different speed. So I think it is certainly, when I think, for example, we have been digitalizing all the quality system, we are not, printing 500,000 A4 pages every year any longer. And I think, that's a significant investment, but also, it helps us a lot in terms of sustainability. So there are different advantages depending on which part of the company I look at.
Okay. I want to connect back to Krista's discussion about shortages. Shortages is a sensitive area. It's a very complex area, as Krista very well illustrated. It's many factors, and historically maybe there has been a tendency to, let's call it the blame game on these issues. We have looked a lot on the shortages, and it's quite interesting to see that some countries, like Denmark, have very little shortages, and other countries, like Italy, for example, has, at least they report a very, very long list of shortages. It might be that some reports and some don't report. It might be that the list in Italy is poorly maintained. There is product that has been on shortages for 4 or 5 years, and it's still on the list, and so on. But some of the do's and don't, what are the things we need to you think, do to reduce this problem? Because it causes patient concern, it causes unnecessary use of professional people like doctors and pharmacists and so on, and it creates a hell of a lot of inefficiency in many places. So anyone who wants to start, what's the most important thing for us to address? Tony, do you have something that you would...
Well, Per, I think it starts with better data. So maybe IQVIA, we've got to figure out how we can get this data more accurate in these markets. But, it's always about quick, efficient, honest, transparent information. Whether it's Italy, Denmark, or the US, you don't want hoarding to happen with products, and that happens quite frequently when pharmacies or hospitals sense trends are going in a certain direction. You need to understand what's in the marketplace, what's in the channel, where competitors are having issues, work with regulators and folks like yourself, quite frankly, to say, hey, we've got an issue with this basket of products. Can we see change? We saw a major challenge with shortages, 2 years ago, pre-COVID actually. So I don't know if the fact that the system changed so much during this COVID time period that it kind of reset the balance with everything. I haven't seen it as much, but certainly the folks in this marketplace know better than I would. But it always starts with communication, as upfront and honest as you can have it with folks in the marketplace, so we can get ahead of it. Usually, if we have API in-house, we can turn product around in anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks, depending on where it's been manufactured. But if you're asking us to triple our business, it's not going to be done without 6 to 8 months lead time, most likely. So that's why some of those trends are important, not just when you're out of supply, but when you are having trouble getting it. It usually doesn't just go away. It usually has a leakage factor over a previous 6 months period. But I think it starts with great dialogue with our partners in the marketplace and collaboration with them to say, what can we do to help?
So I translate that to say that, as Krista said, we need to do forecast. And I don't think that forecast itself, I think it's forecast when there is a trend shift, an alert that the trend shift is happening. And just now in UK, we have a government task force, which is the son of the COVID task force for HRT. Because we have shortage, so big shortage in the market. And there should have been alerts going out that the demand trend is drastically changing. It was a pure demand shift issues. The Danes has been, as I said, very good on that. I also heard the word artificial intelligence. So I just want to give a practical example where I think this could be useful. So if we are dependent on ARP from active substance from a specific region in India or China or something like that, it might be good that we know that this is the region. So if we get natural disaster in that area, we can raise the warning flags that the supply might be disrupted here at one point. And that's the typical type of thing that you would use to augment our historic sales data for this. Some people talk about stockpiling, for example. What's your view on stockpiling? What do you say, Joan?
I don't think stockpiling is the solution for shortages, but it's just a personal opinion. First of all, I think the topic was very well covered this morning, and I agree with everything that Tony just said. This probably is a more complex topic than the squeeze of margin, because here there's more than what root cost, and it's a complex matter to solve. I think stockpiling can be something that can help to mitigate, but it's not the solution. I think the solution is really the production. And sometimes the production is a problem because there's no possibility for manufacturers to fulfill the demand, or sometimes because of what Tony said, that is also hard to read the data and to really understand the production. That is not something that you do today and tomorrow is on the street. I think that for me, one of the key elements here to try to better manage shortages is communication. And communication then covers a lot of this aspect, which is better understanding in advance when manufacturers could have problems, helping manufacturers to better understand the dynamics of the market, because there we can have something to say, better manage with the governments the requirements and the needs. Norway put in place probably in the last 2 years for COVID and non-COVID related diseases, probably 3 or 4 different emergency stock plans. And this probably solved just a fraction of the shortages, because I don't think that you can just solve the shortages with stockpiling or with things like that, where basically you move the problem from one roof to another roof. I don't think that the issue is the stock is in a pre-wholesale, in a wholesale, in a government area, in the manufacturer. I think that the issue is that this is one of the main examples where we can better collaborate each other through all the supply chains to try to solve the real issue, which is in the production area.
Pierluigi, on the innovative side, normally we don't have shortages. When we look on statistically, it's a very limited number of shortages. Is it just because the margins are so much higher, so for the manufacturer it's very expensive to have shortages, and because of that they have higher safety stock? Is that what happens, or how would you describe it?
Well, I mean, if I compare and contrast where I am versus where I was some years ago with Sandoz, right?
Okay.
I think, I mean, the demand is much more predictable in the innovation part of our portfolio, Angelini Pharma. Same was when I was with my previous companies, compared to a generic business where, as you know, it's binary. In many countries, you have tenders, you may in or out, and it's very complicated to frankly speaking, forecast it, right? Plus, I mean, and therefore, I mean, it's easier, the demand forecasting, less swings, and also, safety stock, I'm not a great, to your point, I'm not a great believer that you can manage a company by creating high safety stocks, because it gets inefficient. I mean, the margin squeeze force us to look at the cash flows and understanding, where it makes sense to keep our capital. So it is a different animal living in the innovative world versus genetics. And genetics is, from that standpoint, I think, I mean, having worked in medical device, in innovative pharma, in genetics, I can say that genetics was certainly the most complicated journey that I had because of the incredible swings in demands and complexity of the market, complexity of the portfolio. So, I mean, I really admire people who are working in the generic business because of the competitive forces that they have to deal with.
I have a series of other questions here, but I just wanted to make sure, do we have any questions from the floor to my panel before I continue on the track? There might be something that you want to comment on what we already have discussed, or? Otherwise, I want to continue on a slightly different track. So we have been brought up in an era of increased globalization. Production has moved to the lowest cost possible. COVID created an impulse or something to question that strategy, and partly because we got, during COVID, trade barriers. We had a period where India said we won't export paracetamol to Europe any longer, and we normally use 1,200 tons or something like that a month. It's an enormous quantity. We're highly dependent on it. What's your thought about this with the globalization? Will we, I mean, there's a lot of countries that says produce in US for US market, produce in Europe here, and produce in UK for UK market. Most countries says this. And then that got into a new gear with the crisis in Ukraine, and where we now have another barrier in another direction. Tony, do you have a thought or comment about this? What will happen? And what is logical to do going forward?
Well, I'm going to go back and ask my team why ibuprofen sales went down during the COVID period so much if paracetamol couldn't get into Europe. But, I think, Per, you're asking a complex question that I don't know there's a simple answer for. We have 50 facilities around the world, and we believe in globalism. We believe in manufacturing globally. We have 16 manufacturing sites in Europe. We probably have 4 or 5 in North America as well. But at the same time, we have to look at what the demands of the market and those paying for the product need, and that tends, cost is a piece of that. We understand that, and it's not just labor arbitrage, it's about scale, expertise, and you've moved a lot of that intellectual property from the manufacturing side to different locations. Maybe it may be India, maybe it's China, maybe it's somewhere else, but I think it's always about, even during COVID, our supply, our service levels across 2,000 products were better than they've been in 10 years, quite frankly. Now, there's going to be spots. You could always identify one product or two that certainly somebody holds back or somebody quarantines for their own marketplace. That'll never be a perfect world. I mean, you can bring every production site into every country and you'll still have issues somewhere. It's about a holistic solution, really understanding the needs of the market. And frankly, when a pandemic hits, you see surges in in product categories you would never dream you would see. Sedation medication in hospitals grew 300 or 400% during COVID, and we were trying to be prepared as we could, but you couldn't. I wish I had artificial intelligence, or Elon Musk could have helped me forecast that, because I couldn't. And we couldn't, but we did catch up quickly to ensure we can meet the market needs. So I think it's a combination of cost efficiency, scale, and I do think having some facilities, some plants close to markets has value depending on the type of products you're selling in a marketplace. Like I said, we've got probably 5 sites in Ireland, probably 3 or 4 in France. We've got a facility in Italy. These are some of our biggest markets, a few in Germany. At the same time, much of what we're servicing is coming from global sites. So I think it's a complement and a hybrid, at least from my perspective in the organization we run.
But if I go back to Joan's wish, one is that you have a higher flexibility, shorter lead time from a demand is adjusted to you can deliver. Isn't it so that a local production, at least a local finishing production, is quite important in those sense? And in the generic industry, it used to be so that I think that Actavis, for example, had a finishing thing in Denmark, where they, on very, very short notice, could make a pack for Denmark versus for Finland versus and so on.
Yeah, well, and I certainly can't say someone else's strategy didn't work for them. What we've done is built a packaging center in Europe, a patching center in Como in Hungary that services our European markets, so that we kind of consider that our finishing, let's call it, from solid oral dose to kind of putting it in blister packages. We've kind of have looked through the supply chain and what makes the best sense to get the best price to the market in the most efficient time with the most nimbleness is really that end packaging from our perspective. But certainly Actavis or others might have built facilities and kept them in Denmark and been able to respond quicker. So.
We talked about trade barriers, Ukraine and the conflict in Ukraine. I know that many of your companies has been involved in different way in this. I think Mark, even Galenica from your have tried to contribute to helping the parts here. And it would be interesting to see what your view is and what help we can actually give to the humanitarian crisis that's happening here.
It was not a strategic decision we have done when the war started. I guess it was 24th of February. Then we had just a couple of days after this, we had the executive board meeting, and then we talked about it, and it was just a humanitarian decision and not strategic one that we have decided, okay, we're gonna help as fast as possible in whatever way it will be. And then Galexis with Andy Koch, which is in the room, has taken the lead, and they organized in just a couple of days the first transport to Ukraine himself to live, because we have decided not to go, for example, to Poland, really to a hospital in Ukraine, and then we organized with a couple of partners. At the end, there was 3 transports with about 60 tons of material, different materials, for about worth over 3 million Swiss francs. We organized in a couple of weeks. They really worked 24 hours a day. It was an internal task force, but with great help of different manufacturers, companies, people. Also, we have found someone in a bank, but she was connected with the daughter of the minister of health in Ukraine, and they could help us to go to the Ukraine with our transport. And but it was nothing at all strategic. It was really just to try to help as fast as possible, till maybe the big organizations like the Red Cross or all the big helping organizations are able to help. And then we have also taken this decision then to stop after a couple of weeks because we want to do like kind of a competition to the huge organizations like the Red Cross, and then we stopped. And we did also internally. We collected some money with our employees. We asked them to spend some money, and we promised our organization to double the money. And even our employees, they collected 115,000 Swiss francs, I guess, around, and then we doubled the amount as Galenica, and we have spent then 250,000 Swiss francs to help really as fast as possible in the Ukraine.
Very good, very
but
impressive.
Not strategic and not a business decision. It was really a decision by human beings.
But Tony, you must had business in most of, well, maybe in Ukraine, certainly in Russia, but also in some of these countries where the refugees are coming from. So for you, this must have been a much more hands-on, practical event.
I mean, I compliment Mark and his team what they did, and I think so many of our organizations were probably the same way. We just acted like human beings very quickly. And the first and foremost thing for us was getting our team out of Ukraine, if we could, safely, giving them safe passage to other markets. We've got a great business in Poland. We have a good business in Romania and Hungary as well. And many of our employees either entered those countries, and we've seen obviously waves of 14 million refugees. I think the latest 30% of their population had at one point been out of the country. And then you work with the markets on how do you get these folks medicine and care. We have people living with many of our employees. I mean, it's just an amazing generosity. The heart of these folks is just amazing. And, working like in Poland, for instance, we created, bilingual marketing plans to make sure that people for the refugees from Ukraine could find medicine that they needed in pharmacies, and finding the right, it was a product finder, a marketing tool for them. But I think it's safety, it's medicine, donations, and then it's money. We've done the same thing in terms of donations and giving money to the Ukraine. So yeah, it was an enormous initiative. It's had an interesting impact on our business, but the first and foremost is the human nature of our teams and what they did, I think matters most, and I think it trumps all business, and I think they stepped up when they needed to.
Any of you who wants to? Shuan?
Well, GDP requirements were not lifted into Ukraine, so I think that this is why most of European entities decided to help on a cash basis Ukraine. The exception for us is, well, the operations closest to Ukraine that we have is Romania, Czech, and Lithuania, I may say. And the Lithuanian team in particular, it's interesting because when you talk to these people that grew up under the former regime of the Soviet Union and you talk to them, and perhaps this is what sometimes Tony was referring to, is an eye-opener. The way they think and the feelings that they express is really something that you don't think of because we were not exposed to that. And I may say sometimes you gotta process what they tell you. So Lithuania was the only operations that we have that they found a real tangible commercial way to enter products into Ukraine using a license from the government. But most of the help that we are doing is first of all, is coordinated between Alliance Healthcare and AB, trying to make sure that we have a kind of a control in what we do. But most of what we've been doing was on a cash basis. And AmerisourceBergen has a program where basically if any employee donates, they double that donation. So we've been trying to help as much as we can. We were checking the shipments that we get from manufacturers, and also with IQVIA, that we partner in different activities that are going to the region just to make sure that we understand where if it's going to Donbass or Crimea, then we hold that. And, but I think like everybody else, and not just on this panel, but in this room, I mean, we're trying to help in any possible way, but that is mostly on cash basis.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what I heard. In our case, linking with the Red Cross organization, they had a list of products that they were in need. So we sent 100,000 2,500 packs of painkillers and antibiotics, because they are part of our portfolio 3 days after the war started. I think the beauty of a relatively small company like ourselves is that we can take decisions immediately and act very fast, right? But in a coordinated fashion, just to avoid it, we were going different directions, because, like you said, one also, in our case, we have a pretty big operations in Poland, and the Polish people have been very welcoming. They have 2.5 million of Ukrainians, and therefore we were helping specifically the Polish team to cope with the emergency situation there, because 2.5 million out of 50 is a significant number of people, right, coming into your country.
Okay, my last suite of question, and it's about the environmental part. And the environmental thing didn't used to be on the top of the agenda, but I would say that already in our Portugal meeting, it was certainly raised a big step. Normally, it's triggering event that gets things to start to happen. Just now we have a triggering event with Russian oil and Russian gas and so on. I actually, back in Sweden last week, saw that the sales of cars in Sweden, during the first quarter, 28% of them were all electric, and another 25% of the cars were now hybrids. A year earlier, the all electric was 1.2%. So we might be on a trigger event here. Now, when we look on our different businesses, and when we look on, for example, the delivery, the last from the wholesaler to the pharmacy, there is certainly a lot of miles of trucks that is running, and certainly in some countries. And we were in Portugal here in last year, and we learned how much driving it's done in Portugal for this. Will this change, and how can we get this to change? I mean, it's certainly in the interest of the wholesalers to go to 1 a day delivery to the pharmacy, rather than the Portuguese, which I think is 6 times a day between the different wholesalers. Have we reached a point where we can influence it, or does it have is the pharmacist too conservative to change his way of operating? And if it's your own pharmacy, Joan, how frequently do you deliver to your own pharmacies?
Well, I don't know how many questions in one question. First of all, I don't know what Sven is. I was listening to the buy things in Rotterdam, but not like it's flat and it's small. But I think it's a very simple example, right? I mean, internally in Alliance Healthcare, environmental is coming higher and higher in the agenda, to the extent that some variable compensation is linked to that. But not only. I mean, in UK, for example, the NHS is proactively asking us, okay, what's your green agenda for the coming 5 years? With manufacturers, when we go to tender, that is already an item. And it's not just to be nice, but they really want distributors to align the green agenda with their topics. I think that the place where we deliver the highest numbers per day is maybe Cairo, which I think there is 10 or more, and even with motorbikes. But I will not call up names here, but we are having interesting conversations already with 2 manufacturers that they really want to go to 1 day delivery as part of their green agenda. So here we're back to the sandwich, where we really want to help on that, but we, if you like, to a certain extent, miseducated pharmacies that can call us 6 times a day for a box of paracetamol or aspirins, and then we go. And by the way, we go giving even higher rebates every year that goes by, as Mark was talking about. So I think that this is another example of connecting the dots and collaboration and trying to align what we need between the manufacturers, the distributors, and the pharmacies. Because honestly, I don't think that unless it's for an urgent request that wars to go, I don't think that UK is a big market and we go twice a day. And I think that is even more than enough. So I think that it would be possible to have one-day delivery. US is next-day delivery. So you collect the orders, you pick up in your service centers overnight, and you deliver next day. In Netherlands, we deliver overnight. We have the keys of all the pharmacies. We go open the pharmacies, leave the tow there, and we go next day. So this is a good example that one delivery a day, not to reduce cost, but just to reduce emissions and have a good topic on the environmental agenda is something that is possible, but it's part of the education in some countries.
I saw that Mark took a lot of different small comments, notes to this. Mark, in Switzerland, where is this on Galenica's agenda, the green issues?
No, I just thought before all, I guess we should have a broader look at sustainability and not just of the environmental. Of course, there are different cases. There are patient security, there are employees, there are corporate governance. I guess it's not just, of course, right now because of the crisis in Ukraine, because of the gas problem you all have in the developed countries. We all talk about this subject, but we should talk about more broader about sustainability and about also create a sustainability strategy, I guess, for companies, and not just now an operational execution to reducing CO2 or something like that. I guess that's the point. And of course, to the environment is one of the point, and if it's necessary to go 5 times a day to a pharmacy or not, but I'm also with Juan, the pressure not from the healthcare business, but the pressure from other businesses, same-day delivery. Even if you live in a city, I guess it's maybe here in Berlin, if you trade something with Amazon, I guess you get it maybe in 2 hours, and that's if it makes sense or not. It's just the pressure also from the customer side, and we don't go 5 times a day to our pharmacies, or we go normally even twice, but even twice, you can say, why twice? Aren't they able to organize themselves better than it has to be in twice a day? But at the moment, it's also competition, and not just the pharmacist, it's also the whole market demands this, and that's why I guess we should start a discussion, not just in our business, maybe discussions should be started on a society level, that what are we going to do in the future? What are the customer needs? How we can also, I would say, start a discussion with the customers, with society. Are you really willing to pay such a huge price on your environmental business just to get all the stuff you purchase today, to get it in a couple of hours or even tomorrow? If it's really necessary to have, if you buy, I don't know, something, I don't know, shoes or something like this, to get it tomorrow in your briefcase, is it really necessary, or is it just that the competition created this demand for the customer? And if we maybe would start a discussion if it has to change in the future, because it's not just about same-day delivery, it's about sustainable businesses and sustainable strategy. Maybe it would help. But of course, we do whatever we can do. We also communicated the first time now sustainable goals for the capital market. And I guess that's one of the good things. If you're a stock-listed company, the pressure from the investors are so high that you have a sustainable strategy, that you have to. And that's maybe one of the good pressure ones. There are obviously less good pressures from the capital market, but I guess that's a good pressure. And if you're a stock-listed company today, you have to have a sustainable strategy. If not, you're just losing your investors.
Okay. One example where regulators can also help us. I was discussing with the general manager of one of our affiliates. He was telling me there is a country in Europe where a hospital can order 1 pack and require the delivery within 24 hours by law. Now imagine how, speaking about sustainability, there might be somebody who issues a law whereby a company needs to take 1 pack of an epilepsy drug, so we're not speaking of a life-saving drug, unless it's a very serious patient, and we need to deliver 1 pack within 24 hours in the middle of nowhere. I think, this, everybody needs to do its own part, frankly speaking, right? Regulators can also help us. And then the question comes to your point is, how many customers ourselves will be willing to accept that I go to pharmacy A because I know that pharmacy A is the one which is accepting 1 delivery per day, instead of going to pharmacy B, which gets 6 deliveries per day. Same question I asked to my team when it comes to packaging. How many customers, apart from market researches, where we always say we want, packaging which is more and more, I say, with less and less material, how many of us are truly willing to pay more for different packaging? Because, one thing is the theory, and one thing, unfortunately, is the practice, right? And eventually we're going to get there, but in the meanwhile, the competitive forces are very, a bit, I say, opposite.
But at least we should try. If no, we never know it.
But Pierre-Luigi, even if they have 6 deliveries a day, it's then likely that you come, present your script, they don't have it, and you still have to wait. Then, in my Boots pharmacy that I used to use in Windsor, I wouldn't go there. I would wait. I would ask them to tell when they have my script filled and ready. So with technology, we could actually come to a situation where I alert my pharmacy in advance, and when I come, it's there. So the solutions might look different. Yes.
Well, this is another example of miseducation, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the fear of losing share. Well, if I go only 1 time a day, I will be losing market share because my competitors will not do the same. That's one point. The other point is that, as pharmacists knows that if it is not distributor A, it will be B or C that will bring the 1 box of paracetamol, they reduce their stock to the minimum. And this is not a problem with pharmacists. Everywhere you go, it's harder and harder to leave the store with the product with you. Most likely you have to wait. So this is another change that requires for better efficiency, but basically for sustainability. Because again, sometimes we do things in our sector because we're used to do that. I mean, we've been doing that for the last decade. But if we would restart many things over today, I'm sure that we'll be operating in a quite different way.
So the 2 manufacturers here, have any of you started to put requirements on the wholesalers that's handling on your product on these ESG issues? Or do you see that to come?
Boy, maybe I'll shoot first. We have not. I don't know that we've had that discussion. I know Beatrice, from a board level, this is a huge issue. We've got a CSR report. They do a tremendous job manufacturing, access to products, clean water, CO2 emissions. But we haven't trickled that downstream in terms of requirements from our customers. The great news is many of them are looking at some of these activities, I think, in the right way. But I think it's worthy of a discussion. If it helps the greater cause, maybe we should think through that a little more.
No, we didn't. But I welcome a conversation country by country where, frankly speaking, we could have a conversation with multiple wholesalers, because then your question, we don't want to be in a competitive disadvantage versus others. Therefore, it requires a collaborative approach by people who have a decent, market share, so that we can actually spearhead this change.
A last try to see if we have someone in the audience who has any questions, or are we asking or answering the questions automatically here?
I don't have a question, rather a comment. When we were discussing on ESG and the criteria, we have several members who have informed that they get now questionnaires and different criteria from industry. What we have done is we brought them together and we'll try to discuss with the industry associations, because it doesn't make sense that everyone every manufacturer would have a different criteria, sends different questionnaires, so we would like to try to harmonize that and have one standard set of ESG criteria to which we all can agree and which we all try to fulfill as sectors together. And my question would, do you think that would make sense also for your companies?
Any more comments, thoughts, reflections? I have asked a lot of questions, but Joanne, is it something that I should have asked? Any comment, any reflection that you have after this discussion? Something you want to add to what we have been saying?
No, nothing particular. I think you were good at driving us through different areas of our industry. So thank you for your job today here, Per.
Same here.
Louis.
I think your whole list there. The only comment I would make is because I learned a lot. I love coming to these because I get to listen and learn about bikes with solar panels and different things. But disintermediation in industry tends to come externally, and usually the solution is within the industry. Yeah. They just struggle to do it because of everything we just all talked about: competitive landscape, margin, short-term versus long-term. And I think the solutions are within this business, within this healthcare industry, within the stakeholders sitting around us. And I think it's important that we always engage in that discussion, or factors will come and change that will provide those solutions.
Then, just to add to what you're saying, then we are actually in a good situation just now, but because we have compelling event. First, it was the COVID crisis and what's happening, which actually forced us to address a problem. So we talked about shortages. The shortages was there before too, but now that became a compelling event that we actually need to think about it differently and address it differently. And the lack of gas and oil from Russia might be the compelling event that speed up the transition from traditional energy sources to alternative here in Europe. That's how you will remember Putin in the end, the man who drove the change for us. Maybe not. Do you have something more that you want to add?
No, just your question, did we discuss something, or should we have discussed something? I just wrote 3 points here. The first I have written is disruption. The second is process innovation, and not just innovation of products, but process innovation. And the third and last is diversification. And if I look in the room now, including ourselves here, there is some room for improvement, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's including myself, but I thought it yesterday. We are 150 white old men in the room, and maybe we have some room for diversification also in the room.
I think that was absolutely a true comment. I heard that comment yesterday too, Monica. You have a diversity problem here. If nothing else, we have used our time, and it's time for coffee now, correct? And so how long time do people have for coffee? Half an hour? Yes. So we'll meet here again 11:45 then. Thank you very much.
Demonstrate value of treatment. Opportunity is out there, everywhere. Opportunity for innovation, for discovery. Opportunity is out there. The challenge in healthcare is navigating vast quantities of data and information. disparate stakeholders, and new the challenge in healthcare is navigating vast quantities of data and information. At IQVIA, disparate stakeholders, we believe this requires a new approach. It's a complex, when we create intelligent connections. At IQVIA, you can see paths. We believe this requires a new approach. Accomplish things you didn't think were possible. Because when we create intelligent connections, healthcare forward, you can see paths you didn't know were there. Accomplish things you didn't think were possible. Connected intelligence and drive healthcare forward. Connected intelligence brings together IQVIA's expansive portfolio of capabilities. Connected intelligence, including unparalleled data. Connected intelligence brings together IQVIA's expansive portfolio of cutting-edge services, including unparalleled data, healthcare analytics. Intelligent technologies enable cutting-edge services R&D with our industry-leading healthcare expertise. Intelligent connections enable you to modernize R&D execution and demonstrate operational efficiency. Enhance stakeholder engagement, global scale and commitment, elevate execution and drive operational level approach to moving IQVIA has the global scale and commitment to the healthcare ecosystem to deliver this next level approach and unleash moving new opportunities. Discover deeper insights, connected intelligence, drive smarter decisions, and unleash new opportunities. IQVIA, Connected Intelligence.